Hello, everyone. I'm David Russell, VP of Market Intelligence here at TradeStation, and welcome to the Art of TradeStation. Are you ready for earnings season? All right, it's all going to be getting active the next few days. So today we're going to look at some of the tools available on the platform to help you through this busy and important part of the year for investors. First, I want to read you some disclosures, and I'm also pasting a link into the chat. We'll be using the chat in Zoom for questions. So if you look at, I pasted a link. If you go to that, there's a zip file, and I'll show you how to use it presently if you want to go ahead and download it now. The following presentation is for educational purposes only. All symbols and trading ideas discussed by the instructors are for demonstrational purposes only and are not recommendations. This presentation is not an offer or solicitation of any kind in any jurisdiction where any TradeStation affiliate is not authorized to do business, including but not limited to Hong Kong and Japan. Active trading is not suitable for everyone. Options and futures trading carries a high degree of risk and is not suitable for all traders. Please read the disclosure information handout or the electronic disclosure information available on the TradeStation website. Okay, great. So I want to just quickly show you a few things before we get started. We're going to be showing how to activate some special tools that exist on TradeStation you guys will have access to, how to plan for earnings season, and then how to discover new companies that might be of interest going into their results. And then also, after the earnings come out, we're going to have show some tools for you guys to be able to track companies after they have, good or bad earnings reports. If you want to follow that up by looking for opportunities to trade those in the weeks after the results. Now, before we do that, I want to show you a few things first. Where is, here we go. Okay, this is the blog that I write here for TradeStation. I'm going to show you, if you go to TradeStation.com, this is the this is basically the our main website. And what you do is you go to, first, if you go here to Insights, this is how you get to Market Insights. Some of the things that were really interesting to me that I want to mention very quickly is there's been some real activity recently in the automakers. We have this article about the automakers here. We also have an article that kind of profiles a lot of these companies that are active for for options traders. Let me just actually see one thing over here. Let me close this. And some of the other things that were popping up I wanted to mention was that, there have been a lot of initial public offerings recently, and I'm going to be showing you some tools to help you track some of those companies, but also I've written about some of them over here. If you go to events, IPOs, some of these are quite interesting because a lot of these stocks have actually pulled back recently. Companies like Toast and several others that look kind of interesting I wanted to mention. Those are just some interesting things that the sort of stuff I write for people here. And a lot of these tools that I'm showing you are tools in many ways I've created to help me kind of write the blog and how to keep track of the market. And those were, that allowed me to create some workspaces and some of these indicators I'm going to be showing you today. All right, so now if you go to the zip file that I shared the link to, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see there's 3 items in the zip file. This one, the Art of TradeStation earnings season, this is actually a PDF with all the links. You might want to open that up now because there are some links in there that will help you. Next, there is this ELD file. This includes a series of indicators. You want to double click on that. It's going to bring up a dialog box like this. These are custom indicators. Some of them you may already have if you attended other webinars of mine. And you're going to want to import these. And then that will allow the workspace to work. Now, I'm not going to do that because I already have them. But once you do that, you can then open this workspace, the earnings tools, and that's what I'm going to do now. Now, before we actually go any further, I did want to mention, now that I have a chart up, I want to mention something interesting with copper, because copper had a very interesting sort of breakout today. And one of these companies in particular, Freeport-McMoRan, had an interesting move. And I wanted to just mention this because we keep hearing about inflation, oil hitting highs. Copper actually led the rally last year and has had a long period of consolidation. And I've been waiting for a long time to see copper come back to life. And we might be starting to see it now. It's just very interesting to see that. I also want to mention that I've written some about natural gas. Natural gas also has had an interesting pullback here, and there are certain companies, in particular, CHK, Chesapeake, RRC, Range Resources, and CTRA, which recently had a merger. So these are natural gas companies that might want to be on our radar as we go into the winter. I wanted to just mention that. Now let's get back to what we're showing here. So once you have imported the ELD, you can then go to the workspace. Okay. So I'm now going to go to slide 4. And the first thing we're going to do is actually wait. Before you, I should have said this, before you open the workspace, well, it won't work until you've imported another tool. So in many ways, this other tool you're going to bring in from the trading app store. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go from the main TradeStation website, and you're going to go to Platform and Tools, and then you're going to go to, from Platform and Tools, you go to Trading App Store. And it'll bring you over to this other site. And then you're going to type in next earnings date. Now, there's actually on the, this is this tool here. And what you're going to do is you're going to click on install, and then you're going to log in via your, it'll bring you to your client center. You're going to log in. And then what it's going to do is it will kind of, do some things in the background. And then at some point, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, you'll get an email saying it's been activated. So that is necessary for this other thing to work. When we actually go here, this column here is actually the result of this column is that tool. So you're going to want to do is you're going to, once you install that, this column will work. Now, for some reason here, this is, let me just change that. It came through as a strange number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to style, and I can change that to a date. For some reason it showed up. I'm not sure why I did that. So anyway, so this is what you, this is in the trading app store. And if you actually go here to the PDF with the slides in it, this is the link that goes to that same place. So here's one of the things, we're just kind of starting out here with, basically the NASDAQ 100, and you can get to see just right off the bat, some of the, some of these columns I want to show you now. These are custom indicators that I've given you, things like 5D. This allows you to see performance over different time frames, just to kind of see, okay, in the, in the last month, like the last 21 trading sessions, it's called 21D, but it's basically the last month, you can see that Moderna has actually performed the worst. A stock like Peloton has pulled back the most. Now, what I like about this is this allows us to quickly look up and down a list of stocks to see stocks that have been trending higher and pulling back. Very often what I like to do is I like to look for stocks that have been, maybe up a lot in the last, month or two, that have maybe pulled back in the last day or two. And often you're going to find stocks that have been trending higher. They're going to have this period here will show up as a negative reading on the 1 day or the 5 days. So this allows you to just quickly kind of compare how things are performing. But here's the key thing we want to do for earnings season. This will allow us now to actually see when things report earnings. Using this tool from the Trading App Store, next earnings date, it will allow you to basically rank things by when they're coming due. And it will also then tell you whether or not most of these are going to be confirmed. The closer we are to the actual date, the more likely it is to be confirmed. But it also has data that is, it has dates that are, estimated, because not all companies, like apparently Apple has not yet officially announced when they're going to be reporting, but there's, based on previous quarters, there's a way to estimate it. And that's what this data here shows. So what this allows us to do very quickly, though, is this allows us to see a lot of interesting things. Price performance is one good thing about this, but you can also see the stocks that trade a lot of options. So this is a custom indicator I've created, and what it allows you to do is it shows the average options volume by default. It looks in the last month, but it will highlight stocks that trade a lot of options over a certain threshold. When you go into it, you can edit it, And then if you actually go to the input, it will have a highlight threshold, which will then color it, that purple color. And there you can set the length of time you want. Now, the other thing about this is you can also go and look at the PE ratios and rank things by their PE ratio. And another very important metric is price to sales. I'm a very big believer in price to sales for technology stocks. I find it to be the most useful across most kind of growth stocks, whether they are internet stocks, software companies, companies like Apple, also for biotechnology stocks. A lot of the times earnings are not as useful for various reasons I explained in other webinars. We've done some webinars about using the fundamental analysis that exists in TradeStation. In fact, if you're interested in that, if you go to Market Insights, you go to Education, and you go to Platform, we recently did making sense of stock market fundamentals. In this one, I go through a lot more fundamentals, other things like price to book and a lot of other metrics. Okay, so the great thing about this is this can work with any list. Off the bat, I'm starting with the NASDAQ 100, but let's just select all, hit, Control A, delete, and then go to data, bring in the S&P 500. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to come in here. It's going to populate. So while that's happening, I'm going to go on to the next slide. All right. So we are using here two different tools. That was radar screen. So if you have a list, different lists of stocks you like, what you can basically do is you can keep them in a list like this. But if you want to discover new stocks, one of the things we're going to do is use radar screen for that. We're going to use Scanner for that. So Scanner is a different tool. What Scanner does is Scanner will search the whole universe of stocks at TradeStation. The drawback with Scanner is it's slower. And the other thing is it only displays certain values that you're going to be searching on. So if you're, with radar screen, you can add all kinds of different columns to this by going to the studies menu. The thing about radar screen, though, is its drawback is you have to actually add the list of symbols. You can import it from the S&P 500, or you can put in your own stock list you're interested in. But the drawback is that it cannot really discover new stocks. You have to give it the list. So what I like to do is we want to use these two things together. We want to use Scanner for discovering stocks based on certain criteria, and then we want to use radar screen to dig deeper and understand what they're doing. And so we're going to go now to a simple scan right off the bat, scanning for active stocks. And what this allows us to do is this will allow us to find stocks that trade a lot of options. One thing I always like to do is I like to look for stocks that trade lots of options and then sometimes try to find them rallying into earnings, buying out of the money calls. And one of the things about that is very often when a stock moves before earnings, what will happen is that it will not have a lot of time decay until the actual earnings hit. So by buying out of the money calls beforehand, you have less time decay. And if the stock runs and melts higher into earnings, you can actually capture a lot of that move using out of the money calls. The second earnings hit, though, all the time decay will hit at once and the premium will go out of the calls. So that's just one potential strategy. So how do we actually build this? All right, so now we're going to do, and this is one that I'm not able to share with you directly because Scanner cannot be copied easily from one TradeStation to another. We have to build it directly. With radar screen, this is like I shared the workspace with you. But with Scanner, I'm going to go here to Scanner. And now I'm going to go to create scan. And I'm going to just create something that says like, call it, active stocks. Now I've set this actually, it will show, first I'm going to select all stocks. And then what I'm going to do is mine is set to show, if you click on set as default, and I've done this previously, it will save a series of criteria that you can then come back to. In this case, I'm going to just erase them to actually show you how to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, first I want to find things that trade a lot of volume. So I go to volume average. I'm going to go to greater than volume average. I'm going to go to volume average 10 volume average 10-day. This is going to show the average volume per day over the last 10 trading sessions. I'm going to set it to greater than 500,000, no commas, 500, 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go to market cap of at least 5 billion. And so for that, I'm going to go down to capitalization. And this is in millions, so I'm going to set it to 5,000. And then I'm going to go to the next thing is where we get our real analysis. Now, what we want to do is we want to go down to indicators. Now, these initial values here, these load very quickly because they're already kind of in memory for Scanner. But when we run an indicator, it's going to actually do calculations, which makes it slower. So we like to go up here first and reduce things based on these other values, because that what it will do is it will reduce the actual size of the universe we're looking at. And then that will mean that we're going to scan on fewer stocks. And I'm going to go down here to indicator, and I'm going to go to, and you guys already have this indicator. This is the one included in TradeStation. I'm going to go to volume all options. If I just click on type VOL, it'll start jumping down for me. Volume all options. I'm going to hit OK. Now you're going to notice that it has two little drop downs here. It has two outputs. You want to make sure you select volume average all greater than. I'm going to set it to 5,000. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm going to go to this next one, which is, this is another little hack that I want to show you guys, which is by going to indicator, and I'm going to go to industry. This will allow me to see what industry it's in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to does not equal quote. So this is a little like hack. By doing this, what this will do is this will simply return the industry for all the stocks. Remember, like I said, over here in this slide, it only displays values in the search. So if we want to see things like the industry or anything else, we have to include that as a search criteria. So I'm now going to hit run. Right now it's running. Let's see if I have any questions. All right. Will it have negative numbers after the earnings are announced? It does not show these things after the fact. And very often, and I can show you in other webinars, what I've done is I have shown ways to scan for different kind of price events, like when companies have big moves or things like that. I don't have time to do it in this webinar today, but a lot of the other tools, in fact, I can just tell you off the bat, one thing that really was interesting to me that I'm actually going to be writing about tomorrow is Dell. This one popped up recently for me. Some of the things we teach in masterclass was a way to find this stock because it made a 52-week high and it pulled back. So it had this decline in the last week after a new 52-week high right there. So I'm going to be publishing something on this shortly, as this, this for a potential kind of, upside trade, because at this point here we have this high and we have the 21-day exponential moving average on this chart. But at this point, this is all about focusing on anticipating the future things, but then also reacting to things after. But it's going to be based on stocks you're actually interested in. I'm not going to be teaching anything of actually going back and finding companies that did well or not. Part of the problem with that is it's actually very hard to do based solely on data. A company might have good earnings and miss on revenue and the stock tanks. Bad guidance, the stock goes down. So from my perspective, it's very difficult to analytically, when you're working with large amounts of data, to really identify a good earnings report, because there's so many other things that can complicate it. Simply having better than expected EPS will often miss the point. So here now I have a list of all my stocks that trade more than 5,000 options a day. So what I just do is I select right on the column. You notice Tesla's right at the top of the list. I'm going to now go copy, and now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select all, erase that. I'm going to paste them in. It'll take a minute to load the data. But what's interesting now is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on days till earnings. And now what it's going to do is all these companies I can anticipate when they start having, earnings, which is pretty useful. I'll just show you one other thing. You're going to notice here that I included this thing called industry, and this will tell us right off the bat You might not be able to read this very easily, but these are, things like, truck, auto and truck manufacturers, communications equipment for Apple. So this is just a kind of useful thing to see. You can have this same data now by simply adding this to radar screen. Go to studies, go to add study, and then you can go to industry. You can add that at the end. Okay. And now that will also populate. Right now it's busy doing a lot of calculations, but it will then populate and show that same information. So this is what I mean. You can always add a column to radar screen, but you cannot add columns easily to scanner. You have to include that in the initial search. Okay. So like I said, I set these scans up to run. I actually have, you can see some of my scans here. These are all set to schedule, if you see these. And let me see if I can actually make this scanner bigger. I'm going to go to window. I'm going to go to font. Let's just go to, I'm going to set them all to 14 font. You can see this more easily. So what's interesting about this is you can see I have these set to scheduled. So it's always searching for me to find, I have here, I call them actives. This is pretty much the same scan. Every night I have this set to run, for my own use. You can go to schedule, and I have it set to run every night at 8 p.m. So like I said, these scans can be slow. So it's a really good idea to, when you're actually working on the scan, you'll notice these tabs along the left. Here's our symbol universe, then our criteria, and then you can see, you can actually set when to do it. You can schedule this right here, daily or whatever, to different time frames. So this is super useful, and it's good to let these scans run, and then like every morning, just come in and you can paste it into this list. And this can be useful because you'll notice there's stocks that kind of come and go from the list. Some of these names that are popular, Tesla for a long time was not in the S&P, but it was trading 800,000 options contracts a day, and it was highly active. Some of these companies are not in big indexes necessarily, like Crocs. I mean, Crocs is a highly active stock that has at times been, a heavily traded stock, and it's not in the big indexes. So this is just a useful sort of way to find those names and start looking for, stocks that are active and anticipating when they're going to have their results. Okay. So the next thing, let's actually look for companies now that have good earnings growth. Now, what this is going to do is, now these scans are going to go a lot faster because we're not using any indicators. We're purely using values that are built into Scanner. So we want to find companies that are growing earnings at least 10% in the last 4 quarters, and they have to be at least 5 billion of market cap. So we're going to do that by going to Scanner, and we're going to go to create a scan, and let's just call them 10% EPS growth. Going to go now to next, all stocks. I'm going to erase these again because these are set as my default. In fact, now I'm just going to remove them. I'm going to set that as my default. And now, well, actually, if I do that, it'll save it. So I'm just going to, I cleared that all out. Now we're looking at slide 7. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to capitalization, market capitalization greater than, again, 5,000, which is 5 billion. And then I'm going to go here. You're going to notice that these things that are in these folders in Scanner, these are the preloaded values that go super fast. When you start going down here to indicators, then what happens is it takes a lot longer to run. But this thing I'm doing now is going to go in like 2 seconds. So now I'm going to go to profitability, and then I'm going to go to earnings per share, and then I'm going to go to EPS, percentage change, TTM. Now that means trailing 12 months. Now that is useful because what that's going to do is, right now we're at the end of the third quarter. The earnings coming out now are going to be the end of Q3. So that's going to compare basically a stock, say we have, like JP Morgan now. Well, its TTM now is going to be, the December quarter of 2020, and then March, June, and September. It's basically going Q4 to the current Q3. That's always going to be just a trailing 12 months. If you go to some of these other indicators, like percent change most recent quarter, or if you go to year over year, what that's going to do is that would be actually be comparing 2020 to 2019. So you want to just realize that TTM is going to be throughout the year. I always want things that are always going to work. I don't want to be like, oh no, I'm in 1 month and now my scan's not going to work, or it's going to give me data that's really old. So using TTM for most of these fundamental values is going to make sure that you're always going apples to apples. And the thing is, it accounts for seasonality, because when you think about it, yes, certain companies do a lot more business in one quarter versus another quarter. By doing TTM, you're always going to be comparing a 12-month period to a 12-month period. All right, so EPS change trailing 12 month greater than 10. And let's hit run. And now we have a whole bunch of stocks. Now, the nice thing is we can sort them right off the bat and see who's growing the fastest. Whoa, there's Coinbase, right top of the list. Coinbase, which is interesting. And you have also in Brunswick, which makes speedboats. That's kind of interesting. So you can just look down your list. There's a lot of other ways you can slice and dice it. One of the ones I find most interesting actually is Louisiana Pacific, which does lumber, and they've been in a very interesting spot in terms of supplying the housing market. So what we can now do is we can take our list, gonna click always on the left column to do the whole thing, the whole list, Control C. Let's go over here to our radar screen, select all, erase, paste it. And now what we can do is we can again go and look for when earnings are coming out. We can click on this column and it will populate, and we can now anticipate, okay, all the companies that are growing earnings well, here's the actual list of them. And we can just go right up and see when they're going to be reporting earnings. Will this work on 9.5? Okay. Some people are still using the old version of TradeStation. This workspace will not work on 9.5. A lot of the same tools, though. What you can do is, once you've loaded the next earnings date from the Trading App Store, if you go up here to apps and then you go to Trading App Store updates, it's going to actually show you something here called next earnings date RS. And if you launch this, it's going to bring up a similar workspace. Okay. And now this workspace, it doesn't have all the indicators that I've shared, but it will automatically launch this, and you can create something similar. And if you like, what I would say to do is you can take a quick screenshot of this, and then you can import the studies from the ELD that I gave you. Yeah, there are still some people using the old version of TradeStation, so I apologize for that. Okay, so we just did earnings growth. Next, we're going to look at revenue growth. Let's just go back and modify the existing scan. I'm going to go back here and double click on it. In this case, I'm just going to go to scan criteria. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove earnings growth. And now I'm going to go down to profitability, revenues percentage change TTM greater than 30. Now, one of the problems or a drawback of just looking for companies with 30% revenue growth is you're going to find some company that went from 500,000 a year in revenue, some biotech or something that went from 500,000 a year to 2 million, and it looks like this huge growth. So we want to add a criteria to manage the base, because very often in statistics you can have problems when you have small bases that you're working off of. So now we're going to do is we're going to go to the same thing. We're going to go to revenues this time, and we're going to do the actual just gross number, revenues TTM. This is going to be an actual millions of dollars, and we're going to say greater than 500. Hit run. So now we're going to find companies at least 500 million of revenue that are growing at least 30% a year. And what I always like to do is kind of start by clicking on revenue, and because then we're looking at the big names first. If we just look at the percentage change, you might find smaller companies. And right off the bat, as you would expect, we got our Amazon. It's interesting that Apple didn't show up on this list. Apparently, if you compare, in the trailing 12 months, they didn't make the list. So the fastest growing stock, well, there's Moderna. I don't know what NEG is. But here's Moderna. Here's another one of the vaccine stocks, BNTX. Another vaccine stock here. So that's kind of interesting. But then you start going down the list, and we have again, a company like Coinbase. So right off the bat, this is finding companies that have had some interesting growth overall. So then we can go again, copy off of Scanner, go over here to our radar screen, select all, delete, and paste it in. And now it's gonna go ahead and populate that. So basically this was slide number 8. I would suggest that you kind of keep these PDFs, because the thing is this is a quick kind of way to go through and actually create the scan. Once you create them, you can save them, give them names. But sometimes you get a little bit confused, where revenue might be. It happens to be in this case under profitability. So some of these are just good to kind of map it out and continue. All right. Another one I wanted to mention, because I have talked a lot about initial public offerings. It is interesting to look at IPOs because there have been so many of them lately. And very often with IPOs, they get a lot of hype, they go public, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, everyone forgets about them and they just go into this long hibernation. And very often the real opportunity for IPOs can be a few days after. I'm going to close this in case it's causing any conflicts. I might have put too many in here. Let's see. This might be too many. By the way, if you ever want to see how many results you have, it'll actually show your list if you go down to the bottom. In this case, I have 221. When you're working with radar screen, if you right click on radar screen and then you go to settings and you go to page, one of my favorite things is you can go to this thing called reference rows, and it will always just number it for you, which can be useful. All right, let me see. Could you have a link to the slides? Let me go back and just reshare that in case you didn't have it. Oh, there it is. Good. So when you go into that zip file, like I said, the slides are the PDF, and then you need to load the ELD, and then the workspace will come here. There we go. Now our information is coming through. All right. So one of my favorite things is this indicator I created. It's very simple, but it's one of the custom indicators I gave you. So this is going to, it's in the ELD file. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use something called !IPO Tool. And then we're going to set it to find stocks that have less than 100 days of price history. The nice thing about this also is it will adjust for SPACs, because when SPACs, they come out, then they actually do a merger, and they very often will change the ticker after the merger is finished, the actual acquisition. The nice thing about this is this will adjust for that when it happens. So I'm going to do is I'm going to go now to, let's just call it, recent IPO stocks. I'm just going to call it, at least 1 billion. Okay. So I'm going to do all stocks. Now we're looking, just so you know, we're looking at slide number 9. I'm going to go to average volume again. I already have this set. I'm going to just remove this average volume, but that was set by going to volume, volume average 10-day greater than, in this case, I have it set to 500,000. I'm going to go to capitalization, same thing, greater than 1,000. So this is going to find at least $1 billion companies, but it can be less. And now the key one is going to be down at indicator. After you've loaded the ELD file I gave you, this is how it's going to be down here called IPO Tool. IPO Tool will give you 2 different values. One is the percentage change from its lowest price. The other one is its days of price history. So we're going to say days of history, and we're going to set it to less than 100. Now we're going to hit run. Now this is going to take a little longer because remember, we're actually using an indicator, and indicators are slower. Okay. I'm just looking here at any questions. Make sure to see if I missed any questions. Yes. So let me just show you, explain to you there was a question about using scanner versus radar screen. The way scanner works, you'll notice how it's calculating along here. Now, this tool, next earnings date, this is an indicator. And it's not super fast because it has to go and query a server for each stock. So the thing is that if I try to put this into scanner, it will not work. The scanner will time out. So the reason why we're doing this is we are basically using scanner to have one list, and then we're going to drop that list into radar screen. Let me just tell you, if you try and use this tool in scanner, it will probably time out. If you actually narrow the list down massively, like you say I only want to find companies that have at least 200 billion of market cap or something, then you're probably going to narrow your list down to like 50 companies, and then from there you're going to it probably won't time out. But if you're using any kind of large list, it will not be able to handle the earnings date indicator because that's relatively slow. That's the reason why we're doing this kind of two-step thing. And here we have a list of companies, and let's just now sort by market cap, and we find some names. Here's Robinhood, for example. Here's Didi, and here is Toast, which is like the special payment stocks for restaurants, which honestly has been looking very interesting to me recently on this pullback. They went public for I think around $36, and they went all the way up over 60, and now they're back around 50. But this is just interesting kind of to me. I often look at these things, and I really believe if you look at the history of IPOs, very often they start running after about over more than 50 days of history, somewhere kind of between 50 and 200 days of history, depending on lockup periods and other things. They start moving at different times, but it can be really useful to track the IPOs in that period of time when they're seasoning, over 50 days of history, because they start getting interesting. They start getting added to indexes. Analysts start picking them up. The numbers start filtering through. If you look at a lot of earnings, services and things, like let's just take a look at this list. Our data mostly comes from Reuters. So I'm going to copy, I'm going to go over here, I'm going to paste this in. Select all, delete, paste it in. For some of these companies, you're going to see they don't have earnings data, price to sales. Now, this is not because our data is necessarily like wrong or anything. It's just that the different data providers don't start updating this stuff very often right away. It takes a little bit of time for all the stuff to start flowing through. And so what happens is, as analysts starts picking it up, as people start tracking it, they start getting picked up and they start getting interesting. And that's the reason why I think this can be a really useful thing. And it can be kind of good to watch. It might take one or two earnings reports, but then people get interested in it. So that's a really important reason why it's good to know about these companies and their earnings coming up, because there's going to be an earnings season when suddenly everyone pays attention to these stocks or to different stocks, and being able to track them and keep an updated list of all new companies as they come to market could be useful. Now I just showed you the simplest way to do this, but let's actually modify this now. Let's say it has to have at least, and this is when I think we get more interesting. Let's say at least 50 days of history, and then let's go to IPO Tool again. And now let's go to IPO Tool, and now days of history less than 250. So now this is your period when you're seasoning. This is your period of time when you're less than 12 months of history. Okay. How long does it take Reuters to update during the actual earnings season? I have found that they will update the data right away. When it's like Apple or something, it'll be right away. But when it's new companies, it can sometimes take a quarter or two before all the data comes through. I've noticed this. It's true if you look on Yahoo Finance and other things too. When a company goes public, you'll notice certain data is just kind of blank, and then it just starts trickling in over weeks and months. And that's all that is a point of analysts picking up the company. Something goes public, it has no one covering it. Then a few weeks later, as more people, you'll start seeing initiations popping up, coverage starts materializing. And over that period is when institutional investors and the big activity starts happening. All right, so now we have kind of a list of companies that have been public for, basically a year to just under a year of history. And it's just another interesting thing to look at. Let's copy this and put it over in the radar screen. Okay. So these are just, some things that I wanted to kind of mention. I have found it's very interesting to look at some of these companies. Like, for example, we were writing about Neo back here because it had seasoned. And there were some other companies that would like this as well. A company like Zscaler. This company went public a few years ago. It started rallying after it seasoned. Another one, Datadog, for example. This company went public, I think, in 2018. And then you start getting into about 1 to 2 years of history, and then suddenly it starts taking off. It's really useful to kind of just know about the companies. And the problem is the way a lot of media works, they hype it up when it happens, and then it's just radio silence. And the real opportunities are during that period of silence, and Scanner will let you stay on top of them. Okay. Check out Bros, which is Dutch Brothers, right? This is the paint company. No, I know this is going to be an interesting one. With with everything with the pricing environment we have right now, these guys probably are in a position where they have good pricing power. I don't know much about this company yet, but yes, that's an interesting one. All right, I'm gonna now go on to, let me just actually go very quickly, or just mention back over here. If you go to events, IPOs, these articles were of interest to me. This one, basically, these articles I wrote, these last two, I use this tool, and I just kind of highlight some of these companies. But anyway, these two were kind of interest to me, and more companies have been popping up as well. All right, so this is all getting ready before earnings, anticipating the companies that are coming up, knowing these tools. But then after things happen, very often you're going to have a company that has a good earnings report, and then it pulls back. I mean, for example, an example of that recently was Mongo database, and I kind of wish I had traded this one, but this is another company that went public about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and it really came to life last year during the pandemic. And you can see here we have a big gap higher on the earnings, and then it pulls back. So very often you're going to anticipate the earnings here. It's going to, oh, boom, it flies away. What do? Well, you start now anticipating, where's my entry going to be? And you can set entries based on some of these tools here. I'm going to show you how to do that now. So we go to post EPS alerting. We're now moving on to slide 10. So this is a second tab on radar screen. The first one is pre-earnings. The second one is post-earnings. And you'll notice on this chart here, if we go to studies, edit studies, it's going to show the different things you're looking at. You're looking at here Bollinger Bands. So just to understand, it'll tell you when the earnings date is, and then it's going to show some different moving averages here. I have it set to the 200-day moving average, 100, the 50 simple, and then the 8 and 21 exponential. That's something people use. But it also has Bollinger Bands, and it has stochastics down here. So what we can do now is you could set an alert. Say, for example, you were right here. Wow, huge earnings. What do I do? It's up a ton. Well, you can set a price alert that when it touches the Bollinger Band, it will alert you. And that's how you do it. So you go over here to the radar screen Mongo database. And now you basically go to Bollinger Bands. And then you just go to studies. And then you go to alert. And you go to enable alert continuously. I already have it enabled in the one that I shared with you. And now, if this had been the case, it would have just sat and done nothing, and then boom, you would have got alerted here on October 4th. So this is a kind of useful thing to have. I will often have, I look at earnings, I read all these reports, I see stocks jump, and then I'll set different alerts. A while back, one of the ones that were interesting was with our master class, I had told people about this one, which is Edward Life Sciences. And basically it had this huge rally and pullback, but it had this big earnings report. And anyway, this was one that had, pulled back under some moving averages here. And I'm going to show you, the alert for that. But what I often try to do is I try to find these opportunities here. I'm always looking for these. And some of these tools I'm showing you are going to help find some of these. And Intuitive Surgical is another one I kind of pointed out at the time. You gap up on earnings and it pulls back. You can actually see this one hit right here on the on the Bollinger Band. Now these are always popping up for different things, but this is just a kind of approach where you get the big earnings, but then here we are. Look at something like this. The earnings were in April 21st. The opportunity came almost a month later. Honestly, this is maddening. And this can be kind of difficult. How do you find these companies? Because everyone talks about it here and no one talks about it here. And this is what we're looking to do. We're looking for here because, this doesn't do you much good. This is what does you good. So that is where the Bollinger Band can be useful. Another thing we can do is we can look for it to become oversold using stochastic slow. And same thing, you can now set the alert. You can say, go to alert. And in this case, what it will do is it will alert you when it crosses over into the oversold condition by setting the alert on stochastic slow. Okay, let me check in the questions. So these are two different things you can set. Actually, this will alert when it crosses. So for example, on a stock like this, it would have alerted like down here. The key thing is that it will really find it when it reaches these kind of levels, when it comes off the oversold. And in this case, it will do it when it touches. Let's look at another one, like for example, AMD. They had a good earnings report. And same thing here. You would have gotten an alert on AMD with the Bollinger Bands right there, and you would have gotten an alert on the stochastic right there. In both cases, you had the initial earnings move, the pullback, and then you had the actual the signal that would have been triggered in these cases by using Bollinger Bands or stochastic slow with the alert enabled. Now, right now the market is closed, so my alerts don't work, but what will happen is a little box will pop up. I set it to alert continuously, which can be a little bit annoying because it'll just blink, blink, blink at you, and then you'll end up with all these things blinking. You can change it to enable alert once. And then what will happen is the alerts will pop up in if you go to window and then you go to, if you go to view and you go to messages and you go to message center. See, I have these alerts that they popped up on all these. I was looking at Marathon, I was looking at these Bitcoin stocks. So I had all these price alerts popping up for me. But anyway, you will get alerts like this that will tell you something. They'll tell you it was triggered by radar screen. It was triggered because something happened. In this case, I had it set to a simple price alert. If you set it alert once, then you'll just get like a simpler sort of list. And if you're not always sitting at your desk or you're not maybe as active as I am, then you might just want it to just alert you once. So just remember that you can change that by right clicking on it. Now, the thing I actually had set, let's look, for example, MARA. So, I mean, for me, I was just looking when it, see if it would pull back under 40, and it did. That's how it triggered. So how do you see something like that? So what you do is you go to last, and then you basically, in this case, you're going to click on the actual cell for the stock. So let's look at Mongo, MDV. By the way, because this is set with symbol linking, you see this green S and this green S here. Click on that. and it'll mirror that over. So in this case, I don't know. This is a tricky one now because I don't see any logical level. But say you say, oh, I want to see if it pulls back to like 450. You go here to last. You then go to inputs. You put in. You're going to change your lower alert to 450. And now if it goes under 450, it'll start lighting up and giving you alerts. Actually, you have to go to alerts, enable alert, alert continuously, boom, or alert once. You can control the alert by right-clicking on the cell or by double-clicking on the cell and controlling it from this. It's the same thing. So that is setting alerts based on a simple level. So we don't have a lot of companies that really reported good results recently or anything that really was all that interesting today. But I mean, I'm trying to think, we had some interesting movers, but they were, like JP Morgan was down today, so that's not necessarily a good one. But like I said, if you see a stock jumping and you want to see it pull back to a certain level, then you can use the last just to set at a simple price, a normal price level. The two other alerts I want to show you, actually, there's three other alerts I want to show you. One of them is you can simply set net percentage change. Say for example, if you want to see, say you were bullish on just Mongo database again, and here it is, and it's like, oh, it's just drifting higher. It's like, I want to be alerted when it has a down day of at least like 4% or 3% or something. You go to net percentage change, you go to input, and you're going to set to lower alert like -3, and then you're going to go to alerts, enable alert continuously. Now, no matter where, it's kind of like setting a trailing stop a little bit, where no matter what happens, if it has a down 3% day, it's going to alert you, or an up a lot day or something like that. The other one is moving averages. Okay. Lots of you look at the 50-day simple moving average. I'm going to go to studies, edit this, and you're going to notice in this case, it's set to 50. So that matches the red line on my chart. If I want to see a stock and I want to be alerted when it pulls back to the 50-day moving average, I can simply go to this. I can right click on it, go to alert, enable alert continuously. This one is set up now that if it crosses the 50-day moving average, it will trigger an alert. Another thing is the exponential moving average. Let me just see if I have another list of stocks here that were kind of interesting. Well, here's one actually. I came up with this, like I said earlier about Dell. Here's an example we can use with Dell. Now, Dell had an earnings report here. It was actually a good earnings report, but Hewlett Packard came out and had a bad report the same day. Their competitors, so this got hammered lower. Then they come out here and they basically they issue a strong guidance, and the stock jumps to new highs. Boom. And then it hits the gold line. The gold line is the 21-day exponential moving average, which can be a very useful indicator of kind of short-term trend. So in this case, I have this set to, let me see what I have it set to. I go to edit. This is set to 21-day exponential moving average. So let's look at Dell now. You're actually going to notice that the exponential moving average is 104.94. It's exactly here on this chart. You can see the gold in my dialog box. It pops up. Now, say here we are. Say it was back here, and I'm like, man, I like Dell, but I want to pull back. You can then set it. So I discovered this one today because I was scanning for pullbacks, and that's something I teach in other webinars. But you could just as well, it's drifting, and it's like, I want to pull back to the 21-day. You just go here, and then you're going to right click on this, and you're going to alerts, enable alert, continuously, and then it would have triggered that. Look at another one, for example. I think it was it Wynn Resorts? One of these casino stocks had a monster move. No, it wasn't Wynn. I think it was MGM. So it's got some upgrade recently. So you have this stock flies to new highs, and it's like, that's not much use to me up there. I want to pull back. So what do we do with MGM? We can just go here. We can right click, go to alert, enable alert continuously. Now, if it pulls back to the gold line or the gold line catches up to it, boom, you're going to get alerted. Or say you want to see the pullback to 46, which, that would be a logical level. That was near the top of the range. Maybe you want to get closer to 45.5, but, you can set it at 46 so you're ready. Go over here. inputs, set it to 46, alert, alert continuously, and there you go. All right, so these are some of the tools that that are available to you. I wanted to mention these because the EMA with alert on cross, this is one that is that I created. It's a special one. The moving average is one that's built in that it works right now. So anyway, we're gonna have a lot of news coming out. A lot of stocks make big moves. We're gonna be writing about them on Market Insights. You can find them using other tools like hot lists and other things. But what I would just say is, let's just go back to start over with this. Just select all. Let's just bring in the S&P 500. Go to data, edit, add symbol list, S&P 500. While I'm doing that, I do just want to highlight, I wrote this article. If you go to markets, and we go to cryptocurrency, I want to highlight this because this, to me, of all the opportunities in the market now, this is the one that maybe is kind of interesting. This article on July 28th, this article has a list of stocks that are Bitcoin miners and other related companies. This group of stocks, in my view, has the potential to be interesting in the coming weeks. And I wanted to just highlight this article. I'm going to just give it to you, but this is, just want to highlight this because I'm looking at Bitcoin pushing 57.5 right now. Okay. The other thing is, if we go back now to the actual, all right, so like I mentioned here, these can be potentially programmed after a strong earnings report to detect subsequent pullbacks. And now, if you go to the last slide, there's a series of articles here. One of them, this one has similar instructions like I just gave you for setting smart alerts. And then I also have these other articles that, I try and break things down kind of philosophically. Like, there's different reasons why stocks go up and down. And I believe that you can identify some basic narratives. And one of them is volumes, which basically means a company is doing more business, which means usually they sold 10 million iPhones, and next quarter they sell 15 million. That's a volume growth. And so selling more widgets, it doesn't matter what it is. It's a measure based on volume. The other thing is revenue. Now, a company can raise prices. There's a lot of things that can change revenue. So revenue is useful. It's analogous. It's usually going to be in the same ballpark, but an underlying principle is a company growing volume growth. So in this article here, if you click on this link in the PDF I gave you, it explains a lot of those ways to understand things. And a lot of your classic growth stocks are here. But the other one is margins, which can be extremely important during earnings season because companies raise and lower prices. It's going to be a big narrative this earnings season because everyone's focused on inflation, supply chain, all those different sort of things that might squeeze people. That is, squeeze earnings or improve earnings. If a company has pricing power, like for example, we mentioned this in one of our recent articles, a company like CF, fertilizer stock, IPI, we had mentioned this one that was breaking out because fertilizer apparently has been doing very tight business. They have really strong pricing power, and that allows margin expansion. So anyway, I wanted to just mention that because these are important narratives to understand during earnings season. I just have an eye always on words like margin. Whenever I open an earnings report, the first thing I do is I hit Control F on my computer and I just type in MARG and boom. And I'll tell you, maybe 1 out of 3 times it'll give you something good and it can be very interesting. So I really want to just kind of emphasize that, focusing on things like volumes, doing more business, or margins, doing business more profitably. These are really important themes. And these articles here, which I linked to from the PDF, can really be helpful with that. So it's great to talk with all you guys. Remember, Market Insights, if you go to the TradeStation website and you go to Insights here, here's how you actually get to it. And then the other thing is, let me just remind you, if you go to Platforms and Tools, Trading App Store, go to that, and then you're going to type in next EPS. There's also a link in the PDF. Not next EPS, next earnings date. That's how you want to actually find these things. Remember to install this first, And then after you get an email confirming it, then you can use this. If you load this workspace without installing it first, it'll give you an error message and say it's not available. So what I would just say to do is just don't save the workspace. Just close it, come back the next day. Because what it will do is you might erase it out by accident. So just let it update before you actually use this workspace. It's great to talk to everyone. And next month, I'm going to be doing another Art of TradeStation at the beginning of the month, I think on the 4th, about swing trading. I'm going to be showing a lot of the tools and techniques for finding stocks that are in trends and finding potential opportunities. So thank you. I hope everyone has a great day. Bye-bye.